What is going on, guys? Welcome to this episode of Home But Workshop. Today, it's Cigar Box guitar time. This is gonna be a fun one. Stick around, you don't wanna miss it. So I have this pair of matching cigar boxes. I thought it would be really fun if we made one into a 3-string cigar box guitar and the other one into a cigar box guitar amp. Sound fun? Let's do it. So this is going to be the first of 2 videos. It's not too often that I do a series, but we're going to start off with the cigar box guitar, and then the next video is going to be the cigar box guitar amp. I'm going to link to that down in the description as soon as it's ready to go. Let's jump right in and get this done. I'm going to begin by tracing out my neck template onto this piece of maple. I'm going to make a few neck blanks at once just to maximize this board. Then at the bandsaw, I'll rough these blanks out. I'm not cutting them to the line just yet, just getting the pieces separated. Now I'll just use some double-sided tape to stick my template to the blank. This template that I'm using is a scaled down version of my Haley guitar's neck. After attaching the template to the blank, I like to trace around the template with a pencil. This pencil line gives me a little more of a contrast between the template and the piece of wood. It helps me see it a little better when I get to the bandsaw. I find I can get a little bit closer to my template when I'm making this cut because I can see the line a little bit easier. Maybe it's just my eyes going, but I find that it helps. Now it's on to the router table. I recently made a couple videos about making custom router templates and also a video on the specific router bits I use for building guitars. If you guys are interested in checking those out, there's links in the description. Nice finish. I really like the finish that you get off of this bit. I think it's due to the upcut and the downcut in the same bit. I really like these. Now our neck is ready for a fretboard. Since this is only 3 strings, we're not going to use any sort of truss rod or anything. The wood is going to be plenty strong. For the fretboard, I've got this piece of rosewood that's just a tiny bit too narrow for a standard 6-string guitar. So for this, it's going to work perfect. With the fretboard firmly attached to the base plate, I use this fret slotting jig to cut all of the fret slots. It helps keep everything nice and straight and square. Now this jig works really well and is definitely faster than trying to cut these by hand, but I think at some point a table saw sled is in order. When you first buy a jig like this, they don't have the toggle clamps like mine does. I added these because it helps speed up the process as you can quickly lock everything in place. And there we go. Our fretboard is all slotted, ready to move on. Now I'm just going to use a centering ruler to draw a center line on the neck blank as well as the fretboard. That way we can line these up and glue them in place. And just drew the center line on the wrong side of the neck blank. That's one of the disadvantages, if you would call it that, of being a lefty and building right-handed guitars. When I look at it as a lefty, I see the guitar as a lefty, so I end up working on it as a lefty. There has been a couple of times where I've actually started drilling something on the left-handed side because to me it looked correct, and it wasn't until I started drilling that I realized that I had it backwards because I was building a right-handed something, and yeah, so I gotta really watch that. And the last thing before we put that fretboard on is to salt to taste. Just a tiny little bit of salt sprinkled on there kind of helps the fretboard from slipping around, kind of gives it a little grip. And it'll end up dissolving in the glue. Really doesn't cause any issue. get everything lined up and lightly clamped, then we'll lay on the clamps and really clamp this sucker down. I think that's enough clamps for now. Let's let it dry for a little bit. After letting the glue dry overnight, now I can trim off the excess fretboard material at the bandsaw. It's important to remove as much as you can so that when you get to the router table, the router bit doesn't have to work as hard. Helps prevent chip out and tear out and that sort of thing. And here, you can see that center line I drew on the wrong side of the neck. Whoopsie. No harm done though, it'll sand off. Now I'm going to drill some small pilot holes. This is just a placeholder for the tuner holes that I'm going to drill later. Now I need to remove some thickness from the top of this headstock. Right now it's at 3/4 of an inch, which is too thick. The tuners won't reach all the way through there. I need to remove some material to get it down to around 9/16, between 5/8 and 9/16 of an inch. I like to remove the bulk of that material on the bandsaw if I can. It saves a lot of time in sanding, but it's important that you have an accurate line to cut to. You don't want to cut too thin or you risk ruining your headstock or possibly even the whole neck. I've created this little jig that holds a mechanical pencil. It sits flat on the table and places the pencil at 5/8 of an inch off of the table. So if I just lay this flat, I can trace that around the headstock, and that's going to give me a pencil line at 5/8 of an inch. Now I can remove this material at the bandsaw and then sand it to thickness on my thicknessing jig. Now I'm going to go back to those pilot holes I drilled for the tuner, and using a special stepped drill bit, I'm going to finish drilling the holes for the tuners. I mainly use 10mm tuners, and that's the final size of this drill bit. Nice and clean, no chip out on either side. It's perfect. I'm really liking how this neck is going. I think right now would be a good spot to stop on the neck and worry about getting it fit to the box. Now in the past, as I've done these, I've been able to remove some hinges to pull the lid off, and it makes it really easy to run this on the table saw to cut the notch for the neck to fit in the box. The challenge with this box is that there's no hinges to remove, so I can't just take the lid off without somehow disassembling the box, and that's not an option. I don't want to do that. So I think what I'm going to need to do is lay this out on the inside, and I think I can get in there with the scroll saw to make that cut. So let's do this. So using the scroll saw, I'm going to go in and very carefully cut this out. Now using a scroll saw is not the only way to remove this material. A coping saw would work just as well, or maybe even some sort of router sled configuration. There's a lot of ways to get this done. Now a few minutes with a rasp and a file will get that cut cleaned up nice. Fits like a glove. So with the neck fitting well in, I guess what we'll call the neck pocket, now I need to cut a couple of blocks that'll sit inside of the box, and that the neck will rest down on. We'll be able to attach the neck to those blocks, which will hold it in place. So I need to pause right there really quick because I think I just discovered what could possibly have been a pretty bad design flaw if I proceed like this. Let me show you what's going on here. So right now the neck is a little bit long. Just pretend that it's about that much shorter and fits in this box. So the neck was going to fit in here like this. I was going to screw the neck down to those blocks just like this. Now in order to get the lid to close, I need to cut a notch in the neck, which is actually going to thin the neck. Right now, the way it is, I need to make this part of the neck about 7/16 of an inch thick, so I need to remove this whole top piece to make the lid close over top of it. The pickup that I'm going to use is also going to require a notch in the neck so that it clears and there's enough room for the lid to close. So that's going to make it very, very thin right in this area. And I think once we string this up, it's going to want to bow. That could have been bad. So basically what I need to do is glue on another piece of maple. That's going to create like a heel at the front of the neck. It's going to provide a lot of thickness. In order to make that work, I'm going to have to adjust the thickness of this notch as well as the thickness of these braces. But I think overall it's going to make for a much more solid neck, and I think it's the right way to go.
I'm going to rip down another piece of maple that's just a little bit wider than my actual neck. By making it just a little bit wider, this gives me a little bit of flexibility when I glue it on. I don't have to have it cut exactly the right size or get it glued in exactly the right spot. Once the glue's dry, I can route it flush with the router. Now I just need to deepen the slot in the box to accept the thicker neck. Using a small saw, I'll just deepen the slot, then remove the waste. Then we'll clean it up with a rasp. Now I'll rip those support blocks down a little bit more, and we can move on and get them installed.
So while the glue's setting up on those blocks, I'm going to turn my attention back to the neck. In order to get the lid to close when the neck's in place, I need to remove some material to thin out this portion of the neck. Basically, I need to make a recess where the lid can close. That's why I ended up having to add this extra block of wood here, because it's going to get really thin.
I'll use the bandsaw to make the largest cut, and then separate the piece with just a little flush trim saw. And now using a small router planer sled, I'm going to take the thickness down to exactly where it wants to be. The bandsaw cut was just rough thickness. Now I can trim the neck to its final length, and we can do a test fit.
Nice. Well, now we just need to get the neck secured with some screws.
I'm going to drill some small pilot holes, which will locate on the other side of the box where I need to drill some recesses with a Forstner bit. And now I can use those holes to mark where I need to drill the pilot holes into the neck.
So I think that wraps up the majority of the machining and that sort of stuff. Everything is fit. The only other thing we need to do is route for the pickup, but we're not going to do that until we get everything shaped and the bridge in place. Then we know exactly where we need to put that pickup. Right now, we can go ahead and get this neck finished up, get some frets in there, and get it shaped and all that sort of stuff.
I'm going to use a 1/4-inch Forstner bit to drill some holes for the fret markers. At the 12th fret, I'll use a 3/8 bit. And now I'll add some gold pigment to some 2-part epoxy, and we'll use that to make the fret marker dots. I'll carefully drip it into the holes, making sure that when it's all said and done, the epoxy is higher than the level of the fretboard. I'll pass a propane torch over the epoxy to help draw out any air bubbles that may be trapped in there. And now it's time to hit the gym. Well, at least to grab a sanding block. I'm going to sand a slight radius into the fretboard. This will also level out the epoxy. I stop pretty often to clean my sandpaper and the neck. I don't want this to get clogged up, and this helps make the sandpaper last a lot longer. Now we'll drill some small holes so we can glue in the side marker dots.
I use regular yellow wood glue to glue in my side marker dots, and I've never had an issue. It would speed up the process though if I use something like CA glue, but the main reason that I don't use CA glue is because I really don't like getting CA glue anywhere near the neck unless I absolutely have to. If I'm using some sort of different material or something like that where I would need to use a CA glue, otherwise, I try to just stay away from it. I just don't like to take the chance of getting CA glue on anything that I don't intend to get it on. So I like to just use regular wood glue. The downside of that is now I really need to give this some time to dry before I trim it off flush with a sharp chisel. If you do that before the glue is set up, it just pops these things right out. So I've got to give it plenty of time to dry.
And once the glue is dry, it takes no time at all to trim these flush with a sharp chisel.
Sharp chisels.
And now it's time for some frets. I like to roughly get them all started with a hammer, that way I can get them started nice and straight. And then I go through with my fret press and press them into place. Now I'll use my homemade fret end files and file all the edges of the frets nice and flat, and also put a slight bevel on them.
It's time to shape this neck.
I like to start the shaping process by using a Shinto saw rasp. This thing works really awesome, and if you've never tried one, I really recommend giving it a shot. I always follow it up with a combination of other rasps and files, and of course a lot of hand sanding, but to get everything started, this Shinto rasp is amazing. And for what may possibly be the most important part in this whole entire build, we have to burn it. Perfect. And now I'll apply a couple of coats of finishing oil to the neck. This is a really quick and simple finish that I really like the feel of. This particular finish is made by Crimson Guitars, and based on my experience with this finish, it doesn't get sticky like a lacquer or a polyurethane sometimes can. It actually feels like wood, and I like that.
And now with some finish on the neck, we can do a little bit of assembly. I still need to cut the hole for the pickup, but in order to know exactly where it needs to go, I need to basically get this almost all the way assembled. That way we can put a couple strings on there and get the bridge about where it needs to go. That way we have the pickup in the right spot. Now I need to get the bridge mounted, but I need to make sure that it's located in exactly the right spot. The scale length on this guitar is 25.5 inches. It's basically a standard Fender style scale length, but it's very important to get this in the right spot. That way you can get the right intonation. You've got enough movement forward and backwards.
I'm going to apply some low-tack masking tape to the top of the box. This is going to give me a nice surface to write on. Then I'll take some very careful measurements and I can locate the forward and back location of the bridge.
Now I've used a piece of fishing line to kind of string this up. You could use guitar strings, but I didn't want to break into a pack just for this. Fishing line is going to work fine. It's just going to make sure that we get everything nice and centered.
You've probably all heard that saying, measure 8,000 times, drill once.
One thing that's throwing me off on here is this logo on the box. It is not centered, and if I try to align everything with it centered off of that logo, it's not going to be in the right spot. There's more space over here than there is here, so it's important to measure and know what you're looking at. Don't just eyeball it here. Now I could have aligned everything, but it would have made the neck off center in the box. The last thing we need to do is install the electronics. This is going to be pretty simple. All we really need to do is drill some holes, route a small pickup cavity. I have this pre-wired harness made specifically for a 3-string guitar. Is that not the coolest little tiny humbucker you've ever seen? This is going to be cool.
Again, I'm going to apply some low-tack masking tape. This time it's to give a surface for the double-sided tape to stick to. I'm going to use double-sided tape on the template, and I don't want to stick that right on the surface of the box. So by sticking it to the masking tape, it's still going to be held securely, but it's not going to damage the surface of the box when I remove it. Now using a template bit in my router, I'll just route that pickup cavity. I made a video recently on how I made this little template and how you might apply it to some sort of project that you might be working on. Link in the description. See how easy that whole thing comes off? And no damage to the top of the box.
Now all we need to do is drill a couple of holes for these guys.
The very last hole I'm going to drill in this box is going to be for the output jack. I'm going to first drill a larger hole using a Forstner bit. I need to recess the jack just a little bit because the side of the box is too thick for the jack. I want to use a heat gun to remove a few of these extra stickers on here. I think it'll look a lot cleaner. Lastly, there's just a few finishing touches I need to install. These are things like the strap buttons and the knobs.
It doesn't quite go to 11. Aha! See what I did there? And with that, I think we're now ready for some strings. Oh look, they include candy in there. Oh, that's not candy. Don't eat that. Seriously, don't eat it. I do save these things a lot though, and I use them to throw them in my drawers of like drill bits and stuff like that. I don't know if it helps much, but I kind of use it to keep rust and stuff off of them. I almost forgot to install the nut. And now for the most important step in this whole entire project. Clip those string ends. Don't be that guy. Let's try this thing out. There it is, guys. After getting it all strung up, tuned up, roughly set up, we got a little bit of fine tuning to do, I can tell, as everything kind of settles in a little bit, but this thing came out awesome. I really can't wait to get it plugged in. Try out this pickup. That's right. You're gonna have to hang in there until we get the amp built for this. So stay tuned. In the next episode, we're gonna electrify this thing. Right now, this thing's got a great sound without even having it plugged in. Super usable tone. You could mic this up, whatever you needed to do. Use it for a gig just like it is. It sounds really nice. It is a right-handed one, so I'm kind of playing it backwards, just doing kind of some power chord stuff right now. But really, really happy with the way this thing turned out. I can't wait to get this thing electrified and really cranked up. So if you want to make sure you don't miss that one. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel. We're going to be doing the Cigar Box guitar amp out of a matching Cigar Box guitar just like this. So link in the description when that video is ready to go. Make sure you don't miss it. Thanks a lot for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed this one. I know I had a wonderful time putting this together. Can't wait to rock it a little bit louder. Thanks a lot for watching. We'll see you next time. Java. I need a cup of coffee. Speaking of Java. Red, white, and blues. The blues, get it? See what I just did there? You guys ever clean up and put something away that's been in a certain spot for a really long time, but you figure you can store it somewhere different and you'll remember where it is? Yeah. I don't remember where it is. Dang it. I think I've somehow angered the flies. It's cold outside. It's not too cold in here, and I think they've all discovered that. There's swarms. Salted fretboard. My favorite snack. I feel like that guy at that Mongolian restaurant where they cook on the big thing. That thing's gonna die. But it doesn't. It just keeps going. I may have used a little too much double-sided tape. Something's gonna break. Ooh! Fly, shoo. Never have a rag when I need a rag. Oops. Scary, but we're ready to cut. Don't screw it up, dude. Draw in a center line. Rasp, rasp. You know what they say? Clamp it. Clamp it good. Can't believe I just said that. Name that song. Java. You ready for the worst torch ever? The flies are swarming with anger. Bam!